Thanks for joining us for election 2019, the Las Cruces City Council District 4 Forum. Hello, I'm Anthony Moreno. Thanks to the NAACP, PFLAG, and the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico for co-sponsoring this event. Our format is simple. Candidates have up to 1 minute to answer each question, and they should not mention any opponent in their answer. The candidates joining us are in ballot order: Johana Bencomo, Robert Palacios, and Antoinette Reyes. Full disclosure, I worked with Mr. Palacios at KRWG Public Media, and also joining us with the League of Women Voters is Eileen Van Wee. You should also know that the questions we will be asking were provided by the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico, PFLAG, and the NAACP. I have not been involved in crafting these questions, nor has KRWG News. Okay, let's start off with question one. Johana Bencomo, what is your position on raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour?
Thank you so much for having us, first of all, and thanks for the voters for tuning in. It is no surprise that I, as a community organizer, I was a big advocate and will continue to be an advocate for workers and for living wage. If you're asking me about $15 an hour as an aspiration, absolutely. As a reality in Las Cruces, I'm not sure, right? The very first thing we'd have to do is have a conversation with a wide variety of businesses in the city before we make any sort of decision like that. I don't believe that anything on the table has been discussed around that. But if we're not there, if the city is not at a position where we can say, yes, let's pay workers a fair wage for their hard work, then I think the question becomes, what can we do to support businesses so that one day we can get there?
Thank you. Mr. Palacios.
Yes, thank you to KRWG and the League of Women Voters for holding this forum, and to the viewers for stepping up to educate yourselves on the candidates. As far as $15 an hour minimum wage, I do not think that Las Cruces, my big stance is supporting business and having a year of business for Las Cruces in 2020. So I do not think we're at the point where $15 an hour is reasonable for our community coming into the election times and moving forward. But there's always room to grow. So as far as $15 an hour, I think we need to stand fast and stay where we are with our minimum wage and go from there. But it's definitely about sitting at the table and making sure that everybody who will be affected by a minimum wage increase has their say.
Thank you. Ms. Reyes.
Hi, I'm Antoinette Reyes. Thank you for having me here today. To answer your question, I fully support a living wage, but I believe that given the state's recent increase in the minimum wage, that before the city increases the wage locally, that it's more important that we do something to address the tipped wage and the invest more in affordable housing and make sure that people in Las Cruces have opportunities.
Okay, beginning with Mr. Palacios. Presence matters to LGBTQ constituents. How will you support LGBTQ community organizations and events as a city councilor?
Yes, so everybody in our community matters. I will support everybody as I have pushed to support our local businesses. I plan to support the LGBTQ community, and that's in many ways, making sure that they don't feel ousted in our community, making sure that they're a part of every decision that the city entails. If there's something infringing on someone's rights in our community, we need to sit at the table with them and make sure how we can move forward.
Okay. Ms. Reyes?
I believe that it's important that sorry, I'm going to start over. So I apologize. To answer your question, I think that it's important that the city recognizes that LGBTQ events are community events and that they should be treated and advertised the way that the city advertises other things that they try to encourage people to go downtown for. For example, the recent Pride event downtown was wonderful, and I think that it's also important that the city supports LGBTQ identifying people by having more gender neutral language in the policies that the city writes.
Okay, Ms. Bencomo?
Thank you. I think the recent Supreme Court discussion and around LGBTQIA rights, I think puts this community in a more vulnerable position. And for us as city officials and as city leaders, where federal government fails, I think is where we can step up. And so it's absolutely about showing up for the LGBTQIA community. It's about presence. I agree that the Pride event a couple weeks ago was incredibly well attended, and it's about visibility and respect. And for me, I will continue to stand strong with communities that are feeling marginalized and feel vulnerable, so that we can get to a place where true equality and equity exists, right? But it's not just about as leaders or as serving as a city councilor showing up. It's also about advocating for stronger ordinances that protect LGBTQIA communities, whether it's housing, fair work, or any of those kinds of issues.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with Ms. Reyes. I have a question about projected water shortages. What are your ideas for addressing projected water shortages?
Recently, I was looking into the city has pretty good priority in terms of water rights compared to some of our neighbors. And I think that it's important that the city highly encourages water conservation, as well as changing the landscape that they do have in existing areas and making sure that they are low water, low lying plants in some areas to prevent erosion and other things that impact our watershed.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bencomo?
Often as elected officials, I think we have to have all the answers. The reality is that there are people on this very campus who are researching all of this, water shortages, climate change, and as leaders, we need to be keeping very close communication and learning from the very people who are experts in this issue, and taking and adopting evidence-based ordinances that are going to protect us in the long term. I think this is absolutely, the water shortage is definitely going to have something, it's definitely going to have to be a partnership with the city, the county, and at the state level. It is too big a problem for Las Cruces to say we're going to handle on our own. Additionally, though, I think the water shortage is about something much bigger, which is climate change, which is something that I think Las Cruces has an incredible opportunity to really lead by example. And for me, I absolutely commit to taking this seriously as we live in the desert, and this is going to be the way that climate change impacts us.
Thank you. Mr. Palacios?
I'm not currently aware of a water shortage in our community, but we have to be cognizant of what we're doing moving forward. And that is working with resources and sitting at the table and making sure with experts that know about our water tables across the community, that we're not using those resources at a pace that is not sustainable. It's also important because all the water isn't ours. We have the Rio Grande, and as you may know, that flows down south to Texas and ultimately through Mexico. And so we have to be good stewards and friends of our neighboring cities and countries and make sure that everybody gets water, because water is important. It's the key to life.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Bencomo, how best should the city handle ongoing immigration issues?
This question is very personal to me. I'm an immigrant myself. I came to the United States when I migrated to the United States with my family when I was 8 years old. And honestly, what I saw this year was abundant generosity from our city officials, from local nonprofits. And what the city did when the federal government failed was to step up and to help people that were knocking on our door asking for our help. And we did an incredible job. I do believe that that the city support, it's simply not sustainable to continue it that way. I really think we need to continue to support the many nonprofits and local shelters and churches that have been doing this work for much longer than just this year. For example, El Calvario or the diocese, right? How do we move towards getting investments from NGOs so that they can invest in this is our reality. We are in a border community, and we have to think long term.
Mr. Palacios.
First off, I would like to congratulate the city on the process and what they've done. to make sure asylum seekers are taken care of in our community. It's not always an issue of left or right or right or wrong. It's an issue of being a good human being and taking care of others. Moving forward, as far as immigration, the city can't do everything on their own. We need to depend on federal support. We need to, if we don't like the policies, advocate and move towards changing policies. That's where it's done at a federal level. So as far as immigration, I think that we've done a great job, but moving forward, seeing what the city's capable of doing in such a short period of time when there's urgency, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to take care of individuals in our community.
Okay, Ms. Reyes?
As a 15th generation New Mexican and a mother of two, I love Las Cruces, and I am deeply touched by the way the community and the city came together at the last surge of the asylum seekers that were passing through our community. I think that in the future we could respond just as quickly, but I did want to point out that Las Cruces did such an amazing job that people came from across the country to see the way that our processing center was operating, to use as a model for the Las Cruces processing center expected to be completed in 2 years in El Paso.
Okay, we're going to start the next question with Mr. Palacios. What steps, if any, will you take to help the city curb actual and potential gun violence?
So this is hit really close to home with our sister city, El Paso. And again, these are policies that are influenced on a federal level, and but this is our home, and we have to make sure that our children feel safe in school, that you can go about your daily business, whether it's shopping at the supermarket or enjoying our downtown farmers market. We need to take care of Las Cruces. So again, it's sitting at the table and communicating and figuring out what's reasonable. But this is something that needs to be taken care of at a federal level, and unfortunately, it's just not being done very well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Reyes.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What steps, if any, will you take to help the city curb actual and potential gun violence?
This question really hits me close to home. I actually had family members that were involved in El Paso. So with that in mind, I think that it's really important that I think it is the city's role to take action, and by that I mean to have the city work as closely as possible with Las Cruces Public Schools. And I think it's amazing the way that the LCPD has been active in our local Walmart, and I think that it's really important that people are able to feel safe again. We have a wonderful community, and there's so much hate that's coming in from outside of our community, so I think about the safety of Las Cruces every day.
Thank you. Ms. Bencomo.
Thank you. This is such an important question for, honestly, the very scary moments we're living in the United States. I think as a city, we can continue to push the state. The state took great steps this year at the state legislature to protect us, and I think as a city, we need to continue pushing for those kind of statewide policies. Additionally, though, when I think about gun violence, we think about it as definitely some of the horrific mass shootings that we've seen, but we can also think about it in terms of some of the recent crime that we saw in Las Cruces this summer. And for me, it's important. I'm a social worker, and so for me, it's important to look at an issue holistically. And how do we really dig down and figure out what's driving some of the violence in our community, right? Is it addiction? Is it lack of economic stability? Is it mental health services? And those are the places we can actually really impact as a city. And so for me, that's something I'd like to look at.
Thank you.
Beginning with Ms. Reyes, what part can the city play in addressing current problems aggravated by climate change and in planning for our best future?
So that's a wonderful question. I think that a lot of it comes down to the city's green infrastructure, as well as partnering with NMSU where possible. I also fully support other public-private partnerships, and I think it's important that we innovate ways to update our facilities. There are wonderful things going on in cities and countries around the world. Some of it could be as simple as doing a RFP for a energy service contract with the city to renovate first the city's buildings by reducing our energy and water use, as well as helping where we can, and also making sure that there are shade structures in public spaces, at parks, and making sure that there is water out in the community, especially here in the desert. We tend to have many issues with heat.
Okay, Ms. Bencomo.
Another important question. I think climate change is one of the biggest issues impacting human life today. I was part of, as a private citizen in my work, part of the coalition that passed the Energy Transition Act for the state of New Mexico, which is incredibly progressive and investing in a green economy for the state. We're the second sunniest state in the nation and the 12th windiest. It's about time we start harnessing those resources. But locally, that translates into having public and private partnerships, into working better with the state to ensure that low-income and moderate-income households have access to solar energy. That's going to be critical. I think investing in public transit that uses some of this energy is also going to be very important. Promoting walkable and bikeable streets. A city our size, we shouldn't have this big of a dependency on vehicles. And so I think by investing in better infrastructure, we can be a leader in the Southwest.
Okay, Mr. Palacios.
I think moving forward, this is an issue that the city cannot solve on its own. It's us as individuals and community members. We have to educate ourselves about the resources, whether it's blue bins or investing in solar or updating your landscape so that you can be better conservationists of water. But the city, I see them continuing to move towards a more sustainable community. We have many community facilities in Las Cruces that already have solar. City Hall, the Munson Center, the Convention Center. And so it's taking those steps to continue to work towards becoming more sustainable. But for the viewers watching, we have to do it as community members as well. It's not something that's going to be done. And I really don't think it's something that should be done by regulation. It's by taking the steps yourself and educating others on how to be more sustainable.
All right, for the next question, we will begin with Ms. Bencomo. How best can the city address the need for more affordable housing?
Yes, this is a great question because I think as I've been knocking on doors, I've found that this is a huge issue in Las Cruces, and I really believe, and in talking with experts, Las Cruces is about to experience a housing crisis and a housing shortage. I don't think the city currently, I think the city could really be doing better at ensuring that we have better renters protections, tenant protections, and you should not be paying more than 30% of your income towards your rent. And I think a lot of Las Cruces are in that place. And so how do we ensure that we're protecting people who are low-wage workers and have a place that are renting places, right? Again, as a social worker, in the hierarchy of needs, the very first thing you need in order to survive, to thrive, is housing. We should absolutely be investing and working with the state to ensure that every single family has a place to call home.
Mr. Palacios.
For me, it's about building the economy, and we actually have several areas that are opportunity zones in our community. As far as on the federal level, they're still outlining on how those opportunity zones and the capital gain investments work. It's supposed to be 10 years, but say if you invest in a property, you're building affordable housing, and you want to sell and use those capital gains on another project, that's not the way it's outlined right now. It's a full 10 years. So that's one way. The second way is building the economy in our community where people have jobs where they can better support their cost of living. And so that's being business friendly and moving forward and helping our economy grow and creating an industry that really supports the Las Cruces community.
Thank you. Ms. Reyes.
I fully support affordable housing and believe that it's important that the city invest in more affordable housing in areas where there are a lot of vacant buildings and revitalizing some of those areas to encourage mixed use, so having them walking distance from shopping places and recreation opportunities. And aside from that, I think it's important that the city invests and works with the Community of Hope to add shelter space. Right now, I believe their capacity is 35 to 40 people, which it just is not enough. And I think it's important that more people are able to be pointed the right way to resources. There are several income-based rentals and apartments in Las Cruces that are kind of like hidden in a sense that many people don't know they are there. So I think that I would do everything in my power to make sure that people know where resources are and work to increase them.
Mr. Palacios, how will you work to increase job opportunities for your constituents?
Yes, it's very important. If you're not able to support yourself, and especially families, it makes it very difficult to stay in our community, especially say you're coming out of New Mexico State University, a great resource in our community, and the job market's not there. And you have a family to support, you have student debt now, and a lot of people from my generation are moving out of Las Cruces. And so we have to figure out how to incentivize bringing business into our community, building an industry. In District 4, we have Industrial Park and the airport. And I see a huge opportunity with the airport, having Virgin Galactic and the spaceport in close proximity and creating a hub for transportation via the Las Cruces airport. Also working closely with Mavita to find what will work in our industrial park area. You know, Santa Teresa just got the meatpacking plant, and that's because of proximity to border. And so what do we have in the industry that we can?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Reyes?
I believe that it's crucial that the city prioritizes economic development with the goal of addressing poverty, food insecurity, and ensuring small businesses thrive in Las Cruces. There's two different industrial parts of District 4, and I think it's really important that we find ways to incentivize and bring in more processing facilities, as well as bringing in more physicians and diversifying our local economy. I fully support buying local, and I think it's important that the city prioritizes local businesses and the purchasing. And I think that it's important that the city advertises many little-known services that the Economic Development Department offers to residents. I also think it's more important that we encourage more partnerships and act as a conduit to connect different organizations, businesses, nonprofits, and community agencies.
Ms. Bencomo?
Thank you. I agree that we definitely need to create more incentives for businesses to want to come here, but I want to prioritize and ensure that we're inviting businesses that have fair wages and good benefits for workers, right? It's not going to matter if we're just inviting folks who with more low wage paying jobs. But I also think the city has an incredible opportunity to cultivate a spirit of entrepreneurship, right? And ensuring that we streamline the process for how small businesses are starting up, that we continue to have more workshops and clinics for people who want to start businesses and provide jobs to the community, can have an opportunity to learn how that process works before they go into it. And then I think the other part of that is continuing to invest in workforce development, right? How are we giving local workers the skills to get some of these better, higher quality paying jobs?
Okay, this is the final question, and we will start with Ms. Reyes. What are the biggest needs for new or improved recreational facilities in the city, if any?
So there are a lot. So I think that we need more affordable recreation opportunities for seniors as well as our youth. Many of the locations, as I had mentioned earlier, are in need of shade structures. When I go out and take my kids to different places in the community, sometimes it's just too hot, or you'll get burnt going down the slide, among other things. Some parks and facilities don't have any water fountains, some don't have permanent bathrooms, and I think that needs to change. I also would support having another splash pad or two in other parts of the city. Right now there's currently one in Sonoma Ranch area and then the downtown one.
Okay. Ms. Bencomo.
We definitely need to work on modernizing the current recreational facilities that we already have, making them family friendlier, more ADA accessible for sure. But I think District 4 has so much untapped potential that I think as a city councilor, I would really like to be more aggressive in how we invest in our district. That's incredibly beautiful. And places like Burn Lake, who people have so much nostalgia about, really deserve some, it's time that we start investing in a place like that. So many folks, as I've been walking on doors, have been telling me about more opportunities and better things for their small children to do. I think I heard multiple times about a recreational pool, but whatever it is that we invest in, I want to make sure that it remains accessible at low cost for a lot of the families in Las Cruces.
Mr. Palacios.
As I've been going across District 4, I'm actually surprised to see how many parks and centers we have in our community that are underutilized, and I really don't think it's about expanding and creating more. It's about using the resources that we have right now and making them better and more fitting for our community. But also, as far as the youth, it's figuring out a way to bring in something like a bowling alley that we don't have anymore. And whether that means a public-private partnership or providing incentives, there's a lot of room to grow as far as building programs and activities for our youth. But as far as recreational, there are a lot of parks and there's a lot in our district, but there's definitely room to grow on them.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. We want to thank all of the candidates, my co-host, Eileen Van Wee with the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico, PFLAG, and the NAACP. Early voting is underway now for the November 5th election. I'm Anthony Moreno. Good night.